The distress signal reached Earth at 03:47 hours on a Tuesday morning. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his third cup of coffee on the bridge of the Endeavour when the communications officer called out that they were receiving an emergency transmission from deep space. Jake set down his mug and walked over to the communications station. Lieutenant Sarah Blake was already working to clean up the signal, her fingers dancing across the control panel as static filled the bridge speakers. "It's coming from the Zenthari sector." "Captain," Sarah said, her voice tight with concentration. "The signal is weak, but it's definitely a distress call." Jake nodded and waited as Sarah worked her magic with the equipment. The Zenthari were a peaceful species, known throughout the galaxy for their beautiful garden worlds and their complete lack of military forces. They grew food for half the galaxy and had never hurt anyone in recorded history. The static cleared and a voice came through, speaking in the common galactic language. The translator worked quickly to convert the words into English. What Jake heard made his blood run cold. "This is Elder Korath of the Zenthari homeworld. We are under attack by an unknown force. Our colonies of Vithara Prime and Silkwood have gone completely silent. We have received no response from our calls for help. The attacking force appears to be mechanical in nature and is consuming everything in its path. We are a peaceful people with no military defense. Please, anyone who receives this message, we desperately need assistance." Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. They were all staring at the speakers with the same shocked expression he probably wore. The Zenthari had been part of galactic civilization for over 200 years and had never needed to ask for help before. "Sarah, can you get more details on this transmission?" Jake asked. "Already working on it, Captain. The signal is being broadcast on all emergency frequencies. They're sending it to everyone." Jake walked back to his command chair and activated the ship's long-range sensors. The Endeavour was a small patrol vessel, one of only 12 ships in Earth's modest fleet, but it had good sensors and a crew that knew how to use them. "What do we know about the Zenthari sector, Commander Hayes?" Jake asked his second-in-command. Commander Linda Hayes pulled up the star charts on the main screen. 17 inhabited worlds, all agricultural. Population of about 40 million across all colonies. They supply food to most of the Outer Rim territories. No military installations, no weapons manufacturing, no defensive capabilities at all. Jake studied the display. The Zenthari worlds were arranged in a loose cluster about 50 light-years from Earth's position. It would take the Endeavour 3 days to reach them if they pushed the engines hard. "Captain, I'm receiving more transmissions from the Zenthari," Sarah called out. "This one is more recent." The new message was filled with more static, and the voice of Elder Korath sounded even more desperate. "This is our 4th attempt to contact anyone in the galactic community. The mechanical force has now consumed 5 of our worlds. Our scientists believe it is some form of self-replicating technology that converts organic matter into more machines. We have begun evacuating our remaining colonies, but we have nowhere to go. Please, someone must help us." Jake felt sick to his stomach. 5 worlds consumed meant millions of Zenthari dead or worse. He activated the ship's communications array to contact Earth Command. "This is Captain Morrison calling Admiral Parker. Priority 1 emergency." The response came quickly. Admiral Lisa Parker's face appeared on the main screen, her gray hair pulled back in its usual tight bun and her expression serious. "What's the situation, Captain?" she asked. Jake quickly explained the distress calls and the information they had gathered. Admiral Parker listened without interrupting, but Jake could see her jaw getting tighter as he spoke. "How long since their first distress call?" she asked. "About 18 hours, Admiral. The second call was sent 6 hours ago." Admiral Parker was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking through the implications. "Have you detected any response from other galactic civilizations?" "Negative, Admiral. Sarah has been monitoring all frequencies, and we haven't heard so much as an acknowledgement from anyone else." The Admiral's expression darkened. "Captain, set course for Earth immediately. I'm calling an emergency session of the Federation Council. This situation requires immediate attention." The journey back to Earth took 36 hours. During that time, Sarah continued monitoring the emergency frequencies while the rest of the crew gathered every piece of information they could about the Zenthari crisis. The news got worse with each passing hour. A third distress call reported 8 worlds lost. A fourth call, barely audible through the static, reported 12 worlds consumed and massive refugee ships fleeing toward empty space with nowhere to go. But what made Jake angry was the complete silence from the rest of the galaxy. Not one response, not one acknowledgement, not even a message saying they had received the calls for help. When they reached Earth, Jake was immediately summoned to Earth Command Headquarters. Admiral Parker met him at the shuttle bay, her face grim. "The situation is worse than we thought, Captain," she said as they walked through the corridors. "Our long-range sensors have detected massive energy signatures in the Zenthari sector. Whatever is attacking them is unlike anything we've seen before." They entered the main briefing room where dozens of Earth's top military officers and scientists were already assembled. Jake recognized most of them, but there were also civilian experts and even members of the Federation Council. Admiral Parker activated the main display, which showed the Zenthari sector. Red markers indicated the lost worlds, and Jake could see that the pattern of destruction was moving steadily inward toward the Zenthari homeworld. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Parker began, "we are facing what may be the greatest threat the galaxy has ever seen. This mechanical plague, which the Zenthari are calling the Void Swarm, appears to be a self-replicating force that converts all matter into more of itself." Dr. Ben Curtis, Earth's leading xenobiologist, stood up from his seat. "Admiral, based on the energy signatures we're detecting, this force is growing exponentially. Each world it consumes provides raw materials to build more machines." "What about the other galactic civilizations?" asked Councilwoman Janet Moore. "Surely the Corvan Empire or the Ashanti Collective are responding to this threat." Admiral Parker shook her head. "We've monitored all diplomatic channels. The Ashanti Collective issued a statement saying the threat level is too high for engagement. The Corvan Empire declared it outside their sphere of influence. The Ethereal Council is in emergency meditation and will not commit to any action." Jake stood up from his chair. "Admiral, with respect, while everyone else is calculating risks and holding meetings, an entire civilization is being wiped out." The room fell silent. Admiral Parker looked at him with an expression Jake couldn't quite read. "That's exactly what I was thinking, Captain," she said quietly. "The question is, what are we going to do about it?" The emergency session of the Federation Council lasted 6 hours. Jake Morrison sat in the back of the room listening to politicians argue, while somewhere far away an entire species was dying. The debates went in circles with the same arguments repeated over and over. Councilman Frank Bradley was the loudest voice against taking action. He stood at the center of the room waving his hands as he spoke. "We have 12 ships, Admiral Parker. 12 small patrol vessels against something that has the entire galaxy running scared. The Corvan Empire has 3,000 warships and they won't even consider this fight. The Ashanti Collective has technology we can't even understand," added Councilwoman Moore. "If they say it's too dangerous, then maybe we should listen." Admiral Parker remained calm despite the heated arguments. She had been in command of Earth's small fleet for 15 years and had seen humanity grow from a barely space-capable species to a respected member of galactic civilization, but Jake could see the frustration in her eyes. "What you're all forgetting," she said quietly, "is that the other species aren't like us. They calculate every risk and weigh every cost before they act. That's what makes them advanced civilizations." "And what does that make us?" asked Dr. Ben Curtis from his seat near the front. Admiral Parker smiled grimly. "Crazy enough to try." The room fell silent for a moment. Jake had heard the other species call humans many things since they joined the galactic community. Deathworlders was the most common term, usually said with a mixture of fear and disgust. Earth was considered one of the most dangerous planets in known space, with its deadly radiation, violent weather, and countless ways to die. Most aliens couldn't understand how anything had evolved there, much less a species capable of space travel. Colonel Amy Rodriguez, head of Earth's Marine Corps, stood up from her chair. She was a small woman, but every person in the room knew her reputation. She had fought in the colony wars and had never lost a battle. "The other species keep calling us Deathworlders like it's an insult," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "Maybe it's time we showed them what that actually means." Dr. Curtis pulled up new data on the main screen. "I've been analyzing the energy patterns from the Void Swarm attacks. There's something interesting here. The machines seem to be avoiding certain types of radiation." Jake leaned forward in his chair. This was the first good news they had heard all day. "What kind of radiation?" Admiral Parker asked. "High-energy gamma rays, specifically the type that would be instantly lethal to most galactic species. But humans have been living with this kind of radiation our entire evolutionary history. Earth's magnetosphere is weak compared to other worlds, so we get bombarded with cosmic radiation constantly." The implications hit Jake immediately. You're saying we can go places and do things that would kill other species? Exactly, Dr. Curtis replied. That's probably why the Void Swarm hasn't adapted to deal with this kind of radiation. No other species in the galaxy would be stupid enough to use it as a weapon. Councilman Bradley shook his head. Even if that's true, we're still talking about 12 ships against an enemy that has consumed entire star systems. Jake couldn't stay quiet any longer. He stood up and all eyes turned to him. Councilman, with respect, you're missing the point. This isn't about winning or losing. This is about doing what's right. Captain Morrison is correct, Admiral Parker said. The question isn't whether we can defeat this threat. The question is whether we can live with ourselves if we don't try. The debate continued for another hour, but Jake could see that minds were starting to change. The more they learned about the Void Swarm and humanity's unique advantages, the more feasible action seemed. Finally, Admiral Parker called for a vote. All in favor of mobilizing Earth's fleet to assist the Xanthari? 7 hands went up immediately. After a moment of hesitation, 3 more joined them. Only Councilman Bradley and 1 other member voted against the motion. Motion carries, Admiral Parker announced. We're going to war. The next 72 hours were a blur of activity. Admiral Parker moved her flag to the battlecruiser Liberty, Earth's largest and most powerful warship. Jake was promoted to Commodore and given command of a squadron of destroyers, including his beloved Endeavor. But the most amazing thing was what happened on Earth and the colonies. News of the mission spread quickly through the human settlements, and the response was overwhelming. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers faster than they could be processed. The industrial worlds began working around the clock to retrofit civilian ships with military hardware. Jake found himself in the shipyard on Luna Station watching workers install weapons systems on cargo haulers and passenger transports. It wasn't pretty, but it would give them more ships to work with. Commodore Morrison, a young ensign, approached him with a data pad. Sir, we've got more volunteers than we have ships to put them on. Jake looked at the numbers and felt his throat tighten. Over 100,000 people had volunteered for what everyone knew was likely a suicide mission. They were teachers and farmers, engineers and miners, people who had never fired a shot in anger, but were willing to die for strangers they had never met. Colonel Rodriguez joined him at the observation window. I've got 10,000 Marines ready to deploy and another 20,000 in training. We're not just sending ships, Jake, we're sending an invasion force. Do you think we have a chance? Jake asked. Amy Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, watching the workers below. I think we're about to find out what makes humans different from everyone else in the galaxy. Admiral Parker's voice echoed through the station's speakers. All personnel, this is Admiral Parker. Fleet deployment begins in 6 hours. I won't lie to you about what we're facing. The odds are against us and many of us won't be coming home. But somewhere out there, an entire species is dying while the rest of the galaxy watches and does nothing. That's not who we are. That's not what humans do. Her voice grew stronger. 40 civilizations received the call for help, and 40 civilizations turned away. Today we proved that sometimes one is enough. Jake felt something he hadn't experienced since his first day in space 20 years ago. It was part fear, part excitement, and part something else he couldn't quite name. It was the feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself, something that mattered. The fleet began forming up outside Luna orbit. 12 military ships, 38 retrofitted civilian vessels, and 50,000 human souls ready to face the unknown. It wasn't the largest fleet in galactic history, but Jake had never been more proud to be part of it. As the Liberty took point position, Admiral Parker opened a channel to the entire fleet. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now officially at war with the Void Swarm. Our mission is simple: save the Xanthari and show the galaxy what it means to answer when someone calls for help. The jump into Xanthari space was like entering hell itself. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship Defiant and stared at what had once been the most beautiful sector in the galaxy. The garden worlds that had fed billions were now dark spheres covered in writhing metal, their surfaces crawling with mechanical constructs that glowed with an evil red light. My God, whispered Lieutenant Commander Kate Sullivan from the pilot station. She had seen combat before, but nothing had prepared her for this sight. Admiral Parker's voice crackled over the communication system from her position aboard the Liberty. All ships, this is actual. Maintain formation and prepare for contact. Remember, Our primary mission is evacuation of Xanthari civilians. Jake activated his ship's long-range sensors and immediately wished he hadn't. The readings were beyond anything in their databases. The Void Swarm had converted 3 entire star systems into massive manufacturing centers, with each planet now producing thousands of mechanical units every hour. Commodore, I'm picking up life signs from the 4th planet, reported Ensign Danny Walsh from his position at the sensor station. It looks like there's still a Xanthari colony down there. Jake studied the tactical display. The planet was surrounded by a defensive screen of swarm units, but there were gaps in their coverage. How many life signs? About 50,000, sir. They're concentrated in what looks like underground shelters. Jake opened a channel to Admiral Parker. Admiral, we have survivors on the 4th planet, requesting permission to begin rescue operations. Granted, Commodore. Take your squadron in, but be careful. We don't know what we're dealing with yet. The Defiant led 3 other destroyers toward the planet while the main fleet held position. As they approached, the swarm units began to move, rising from the planet's surface like angry insects defending their nest. Contact, called out Lieutenant Blake from the weapons station. Multiple targets incoming, bearing 270. Jake gripped his command chair as the first wave of swarm fighters approached. They were unlike any ships he had ever seen, more like flying metal spiders than traditional spacecraft. They moved in perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. All weapons fire at will, Jake ordered. The human ships opened fire with everything they had. Laser cannons and missile launchers lit up space as they engaged the swarm units. The enemy fighters were fast and numerous, but they seemed confused by human tactics. Their targeting systems are having trouble locking onto us, reported Lieutenant Blake. It's like they don't know what to make of our ships. Jake realized what was happening. Human ships were built to operate in the dangerous radiation fields around Earth and the colony worlds. They were heavily shielded and designed to absorb punishment that would destroy most alien vessels. The swarm units had adapted to fight the clean, efficient ships of other galactic civilizations, not the crude but durable human designs. Use that to our advantage, Jake ordered. All ships, aggressive maneuvers. Get in close and hit them hard. The human destroyers dove into the swarm formation, their guns blazing. Several enemy units were destroyed immediately, but more kept coming. Jake watched his tactical display as red dots swarmed around his small fleet like predators around prey. Hull breach on Deck 7, reported the damage control officer. We're losing atmosphere in Section 12. Jake felt the ship shudder as more enemy fire found its mark. Emergency bulkheads sealed. Continue the attack. Lieutenant Commander Sullivan's fighter squadron launched from the Liberty and dove into the battle. Kate led her pilots through the mechanical hordes with a skill that bordered on insanity, using the radiation fields around the planet as cover. This is Gold Leader. Kate's voice came over the radio. I'm reading massive energy signatures from the surface. It looks like some kind of central processing node. Jake looked at his displays and saw what she meant. A massive structure had risen from the planet's surface, crackling with energy, and surrounded by thousands of smaller constructs. It was clearly coordinating the entire defense. Can you get a missile lock on that structure? Jake asked. Negative, sir. Too much interference from the radiation. We'd have to get dangerously close. Jake made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. All ships, this is Defiant. We're going to punch through to that processing node. Cover the evacuation shuttles while we deal with the command structure. The destroyers formed up and began their attack run on the planet's surface. Enemy fire intensified as they approached, and Jake watched helplessly as the destroyer Courage took a direct hit to her engine section and began to drift out of formation. Courage is down, reported Lieutenant Blake. They're abandoning ship. Maintain course, Jake ordered, though every instinct told him to help the survivors. The mission came first. The Defiant and her remaining escorts dove through the planet's atmosphere, their hulls glowing from the intense radiation and enemy fire. The processing node grew larger on their screens, a massive tower of twisted metal that pulsed with malevolent energy. Firing solution locked, reported Lieutenant Blake. Fire everything, Jake ordered. The human ships unleashed every weapon they had at point-blank range. Nuclear missiles, laser cannons, and particle beams struck the processing node in a concentrated barrage that lit up the sky. For a moment, nothing happened, and Jake thought they had failed. Then the structure began to collapse. The energy field surrounding it flickered and died, and the thousands of smaller constructs suddenly stopped moving. Across the planet, swarm units began falling from the sky as their central coordination was cut off. "Direct hit," shouted Lieutenant Blake. "The node is down," but their victory came at a terrible price. As they pulled away from the planet, Jake counted his losses. The Courage was gone with all hands, and 2 other ships were badly damaged. They had saved 50,000 Zenthari civilians, but it had cost them nearly 1,000 human lives. Major Rick Thompson's voice came over the radio from the surface. "Commodore, this is Bravo Company. We've secured the Zenthari shelters and are beginning evacuation procedures. These people are scared out of their minds, sir." Jake switched to a private channel. "How are they holding up, Major?" "They keep asking why we came, sir. They can't understand why humans would risk their lives for strangers. I told them it's just what we do, but I don't think they believe me." As the evacuation proceeded, Jake studied the tactical reports coming in from across the sector. The destruction of the processing node had created a temporary gap in the swarm's defenses, but new units were already moving to fill the void. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Admiral Parker's voice came over the fleet channel. "All units, well done. We've proven that the swarm can be hurt, but we've also learned how dangerous they really are. Prepare for withdrawal to the rally point." As the human fleet regrouped with their rescued civilians, Jake looked back at the planet they had just left. The swarm was already rebuilding, new constructs rising from the surface to replace those they had destroyed. But for the first time since this nightmare began, they had struck back and won. The news of humanity's first victory against the Void Swarm spread across the galaxy faster than lightspeed communications could carry it. On 1,000 different worlds, alien species watched their news feeds in stunned silence as reports came in of the humans actually fighting back against something everyone else had declared unstoppable. Admiral Parker stood in the war room aboard the Liberty, studying the tactical displays that showed the true scope of their enemy. The destruction of one processing node had been a victory, but it was like removing a single grain of sand from a beach. The swarm still controlled 14 star systems and was growing stronger by the hour. "Admiral, we're receiving diplomatic communications from across the galaxy," reported Commander Nina Brooks, the fleet's communications officer. "The Corvin Empire wants to know our tactical assessments. The Ashanti Collective is requesting detailed battle reports. Even the Ethereal Council has ended their meditation to ask about our methods." Admiral Parker smiled grimly. "Now they want to know what we learned. Where were they when the Zenthari needed help?" Dr. Ben Curtis entered the war room carrying a data tablet and looking exhausted. He had been working around the clock to analyze the swarm technology they had encountered. "Admiral, I have good news and bad news. Which do you want first?" "Give me the bad news, Doctor. The swarm is adapting faster than we expected. Our latest sensor readings show they're already developing countermeasures for the tactics we used in the last battle. Within days, maybe hours, our advantages will be gone." Admiral Parker felt her heart sink. "And the good news? We found their central command structure. It's located in the heart of the original outbreak, protected by massive defenses and surrounded by processing nodes that coordinate the entire swarm network. If we can destroy it, the whole system should collapse." Jake Morrison, now wearing the insignia of a full admiral after his promotion following the rescue mission, looked up from the tactical display. "What kind of defenses are we talking about, Doctor?" Dr. Curtis activated the main screen, showing a 3-dimensional map of the target system. At its center was a structure so massive it defied comprehension. The command node is the size of a small moon, surrounded by energy fields that would vaporize any normal ship before it could get within weapons range. The only way to reach it would be to fly directly through radiation levels that would kill any other galactic species instantly. "But not humans," Admiral Parker said quietly. "Not humans," Dr. Curtis confirmed. "Our natural resistance to radiation, combined with our ship designs, might allow us to penetrate their defenses. But it would be a one-way trip. No ship could survive that much exposure and make it back out." The war room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. They were talking about a suicide mission, but it might be the only way to stop the swarm before it consumed the entire galaxy. Commander Steve Walsh, captain of the heavy cruiser Valiant, spoke up from his position near the back of the room. "How many nuclear warheads would it take to destroy something that size?" "Everyone we have," Dr. Curtis replied. and we'd need to detonate them at point-blank range to ensure penetration of the command structure. Admiral Parker looked around the room at her officers. These were good people, men and women who had volunteered to risk their lives for strangers. Now she was asking them to consider sacrificing those lives with no chance of return. "I'll take the Valiant," Commander Walsh said simply. "She's the toughest ship we have, and her crew is all volunteers. We knew this might be a one-way mission when we signed up." "Steve, you don't have to do this," Admiral Parker said. "Yes, I do, Admiral. Someone has to. And the Valiant is the right ship for the job." Over the next 12 hours, the human fleet prepared for the most desperate gamble in their history. Every nuclear weapon they had was loaded aboard the Valiant, turning the heavy cruiser into a massive bomb with engines. Commander Walsh hand-picked his crew from volunteers, choosing only those with no families back home. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison prepared a diversionary attack that would draw the swarm's heaviest defenses away from the command node. His squadron of destroyers, along with Captain Paul Martinez's cruiser squadron, would punch through the outer defenses and create as much chaos as possible. The plan was simple in its desperation. The diversionary force would attack the swarm's secondary processing centers, forcing them to commit their mobile units to defense. While the enemy was distracted, the Valiant would make her run at the command node, flying through radiation fields that would cook any other species alive. As the fleet prepared to jump into the target system, Admiral Parker opened a channel to broadcast throughout the galaxy. She knew that every major civilization would be monitoring their communications, watching to see if the crazy humans could pull off another miracle. "This is Admiral Lisa Parker of the Earth Federation Fleet," she began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. "In approximately 1 hour, we will engage the Void Swarm's central command structure. We go into this battle knowing that many of us will not return. We do this not for glory or conquest, but because it is right. Because when innocent people cry for help, someone must answer." She paused, looking around the bridge at her crew. "The other civilizations of this galaxy have called us Deathworlders, as if our willingness to face danger makes us somehow primitive. Today we show them what Deathworlders really are. We are the ones who stand up when others sit down. We are the ones who fight when others flee. We are the ones who answer when no one else will." The jump into the target system was like entering the mouth of hell. The swarm had turned the entire star system into a fortress, with processing nodes orbiting every planet and massive defense platforms protecting the approaches to the command structure. Jake Morrison led the diversionary attack with everything his ships could give. The destroyers Defiant, Ranger, and Phoenix dove into the swarm's defensive formations, their guns blazing as they targeted the secondary processing centers. Captain Martinez's cruisers followed close behind, adding their firepower to the assault. The swarm responded exactly as they had hoped. Thousands of mechanical fighters launched from the defense platforms, converging on the human attack force. The outer defenses began repositioning to deal with the threat, creating the opening the Valiant needed. "This is Walsh," came the voice of the heavy cruiser's captain over the radio. "Beginning attack run on the primary target. It's been an honor serving with you all." Jake watched on his tactical display as the Valiant accelerated toward the command node, flying directly through radiation fields that made his own sensors scream warnings. The heavy cruiser's hull began to glow as it absorbed punishment that would have destroyed any other ship in the galaxy. Enemy fire concentrated on the Valiant as the swarm realized what was happening, but it was too late. Commander Walsh's ship had built up too much momentum to be stopped, and her radiation-hardened hull shrugged off attacks that would have vaporized lesser vessels. "Valiant to all ships," Walsh's voice came over the radio, distorted by the massive energy fields around the command node. "Target acquired. Beginning terminal attack run. Tell them back home that we did our job." The explosion when the Valiant impacted the command structure was visible from 3 star systems away. The explosion of the Void Swarm's central command node sent shockwaves through space and time itself. Admiral Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the Defiant as the massive structure collapsed in on itself, taking with it the coordinating intelligence that had controlled millions of mechanical units across 14 star systems. Within minutes, the effect was visible everywhere. Swarm units that had been moving in perfect coordination suddenly stopped mid-flight. Processing centers that had been churning out new machines went silent. The red glow that had covered conquered worlds began to fade as the mechanical plague lost its central direction. But the victory came at a terrible cost. The Valiant was gone, along with Commander Steve Walsh and his entire crew of 200 volunteers. 3 other ships had been destroyed in the diversionary attack, and hundreds more humans had given their lives to stop a threat the rest of the galaxy had been too afraid to face. Admiral Parker's voice came over the fleet communications channel, heavy with both triumph and grief. "All ships, this is Admiral Parker. The primary target has been destroyed. The Void Swarm command structure is down. Begin search and rescue operations for survivors and prepare to assist with Zenthari evacuation efforts." As the human fleet spread out to help the surviving Zenthari populations, something unprecedented began happening across the galaxy. The news of humanity's victory and sacrifice spread from world to world, carried by traders, diplomats, and news services. For the first time in galactic history, the actions of one species had shamed an entire civilization into action. The first to respond was the Corvan Empire. Emperor Vash himself appeared on galactic news networks, his proud warrior features showing something that looked almost like embarrassment. "The humans have shown us what true courage means," he announced to his people. "They have fought a battle that we deemed too dangerous, and they have won it through sacrifice that we were not prepared to make. No longer will the Corvan Empire stand idle while others suffer." Within hours, Corvan battle fleets began mobilizing to help clean up the remaining swarm units that were still scattered throughout the former conflict zone. Their advanced weapons made quick work of the now uncoordinated mechanical units. The Ashanti Collective followed suit, their vast technological resources suddenly committed to rebuilding the devastated Zenthari worlds. Their explanation was typically clinical. "The humans have demonstrated that the threat was manageable through acceptable losses. Our previous risk assessment was flawed, but it was the smaller civilizations that provided the most meaningful response. Species that had always felt powerless in galactic politics suddenly found their voices. The peaceful Marathi sent hospital ships to treat wounded survivors. The trading guilds of the Outer Rim donated supplies and transportation. Even species that had barely achieved spaceflight sent what help they could." Jake Morrison found himself in command of a truly galactic relief effort as his promotion to full admiral was confirmed by Earth Command. Ships from dozens of different species worked alongside human vessels to evacuate survivors and begin the long process of rebuilding what the swarm had destroyed. The most touching moment came when Elder Korath, the Zenthari leader who had sent those first desperate distress calls, met with Admiral Parker aboard the Liberty. The elderly alien's tree-like features showed exhaustion and grief, but also something that looked like wonder. "Admiral Parker," he said through the universal translator, "my people have a question that we cannot answer ourselves. Why did humans come when no one else would? You barely knew us. You gained nothing from helping us. Yet you risked everything." Admiral Parker was quiet for a moment, looking out at the fleet of rescue ships working to save what remained of Zenthari civilization. "Elder Korath, I wish I could give you a complicated answer about politics or strategy. But the truth is simple. You asked for help and we heard you. That's what people do for each other." The Zenthari elder's large eyes seemed to shimmer with moisture. "Other species have told us that this is not normal behavior, that most civilizations would have calculated the cost and found it too high. Maybe that's what makes us different," Admiral Parker replied. "We don't always calculate the cost first. Sometimes we just see someone who needs help and we help them." The cleanup operations took several months. Human ships worked alongside alien vessels to hunt down the remaining swarm units that had scattered when their central command was destroyed. Most were found drifting powerlessly in space, their mechanical minds unable to function without coordination from the destroyed node. Dr. Ben Curtis led teams of scientists from a dozen different species in studying the swarm technology, hoping to find ways to prevent similar outbreaks in the future. What they discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. The Void Swarm had been a weapon created by an ancient civilization that had destroyed itself millions of years ago, leaving behind only this mechanical plague as a monument to their folly. "The scary thing," Dr. Curtis explained to Admiral Morrison during one of their briefings, "is that there might be more of these things out there. The galaxy is full of dead civilizations, and any one of them might have left behind something similar." Jake nodded grimly. "Then we'll be ready for them." The memorial service for the human dead was held on the restored Zenthari homeworld, in a beautiful garden that had been replanted using seeds saved from the destroyed colonies. Representatives from every major galactic civilization attended, many of them species that had never before acknowledged human achievements. The memorial itself was simple, just a black stone wall with the names of every human who had died fighting the Void Swarm. At the top, in letters that could be seen from orbit, were the words, "When no one else answered, they came anyway." Elder Korath spoke at the ceremony, his words broadcast throughout the galaxy. "We asked the universe for help, and the universe sent us humans. They came not because they expected reward or recognition, but because they heard our call and could not ignore it. Today we remember not just those who died, but the lesson they taught us all." Admiral Morrison stood with the other survivors, watching as representatives from dozens of species laid flowers and offerings at the memorial. Many of them had tears in their eyes, even the species that supposedly didn't have emotions. After the ceremony, a young Zenthari approached Jake. She was barely adult by her species standards, one of the children who had been saved from the underground shelters during the first rescue mission. "Admiral Morrison," she said in careful English, "I wanted to thank you for saving my family, but I also wanted to ask you something." "What's that?" Jake asked, kneeling down to her eye level. "Are all humans like you? Do you all help people even when it's dangerous?" Jake thought about her question for a long moment. Around them, human and alien workers were collaborating to rebuild homes and schools, former enemies working side by side because it was the right thing to do. "We try to be," he said finally. "Sometimes we fail and sometimes we make mistakes. But when someone calls for help, we answer. That's just who we are." Years later, when historians wrote about the Void Swarm War, they would focus on the military tactics and technological innovations that had made victory possible. But those who had lived through it remembered something different. They remembered that when an entire galaxy turned away from a cry for help, one species heard it and answered. They remembered that sometimes it only takes one voice to shame a civilization into doing what's right. And in the deepest reaches of space, where other dangers might still lurk in the darkness, that memory served as both warning and promise. As long as humanity existed, no cry for help would ever go unanswered.